name's Lindsay Stuvik. I'm the Water Efficiency Manager at Molten Lagale Water District. I'm really excited to see everybody in here. I've been in water efficiency for a long time, and we've always wanted to do a lot of outreach with HOAs and with our landscapers and property managers, and we're really excited to get to know everybody and very excited to introduce some of our programming to you. So I'm here representing a couple of other water agencies as well, El Toro Water District and Santa Margarita. They were all a part of collaborating on this effort. So I'm going to try to address at a higher level some of the programs that we have in common. But as you know, we're all different. We all offer different programs because we have different needs in our service areas. So if you get a chance during the break or at the end of the presentation, just stop by our table and tell us what you're interested in, because we're always looking to pilot and partner and look into new things. So just so I can get kind of lay of the land here, if you guys could, if you're from an HOA board or a landscape committee, if you could raise your hand for me. Hey, got good representation. How about property managers? Okay, and then our landscapers. Where are you guys? Okay, good. We got a pretty diverse room, so that's really good. We're going to focus a lot on outdoor water efficiency today, since that's the majority of where HOAs have to manage their water. And so I hope you find a lot of value in the presentation. If you have questions, we have time for one or two afterwards, but like I said, you can catch up with me during the break. Before I get started talking about water efficiency, I want to talk about why it's so important. Water supply in our area in particular is mostly imported. We don't have the hydrogeology of North Orange County, where they've got big kind of piggy banks of aquifers sitting in the ground that they can hold on to. We have very poor soils to hold on to water, and so we import 100% of our water. It's a little expensive. If you don't have a local supply like that, it does become expensive, and so we try to keep costs down by keeping levels of water consumption efficient. I want to show you a little bit about where your water comes from. So what you can see up here is a map of the state. On an average year, we import about 45% of our water through the State Water Project. That travels 450 miles from around the Sacramento area south, and that's just to the north of LA. It still has to go through more distribution to get down here to South Orange County. The remaining 55% comes from the Colorado River, which you can see is in red. It travels about 250 miles through the California Aqueduct to get here. Metropolitan usually blends the water and treats it, and we purchase it at the Deemer plant. Our group, El Toro, Santa Margarita, us, and a couple of other water agencies have gone together to try to enhance our reliability, and we've actually built a second treatment plant called the Baker Treatment Plant that we all purchase water from. We can actually purchase untreated water and treat it there. Untreated water is less expensive than purchasing treated water directly, and so it's given us some redundancy and some reliability in our system, and it's made it so that we don't have to purchase the most expensive source of water, and we maintain our reliability. But one thing I want to add too is that during the drought we had a 0% allocation, or a very low percent allocation from the State Water Project, and we rely on Metropolitan to get our water supply to us. And during that time, they were actually able to re-engineer their entire system to take Colorado River water and supply it all the way up to Ventura County. It's a huge engineering marvel. And then the following year, when we had a deluge of water, 14 inches of rain, which we hardly ever see, we're able to supply almost entirely State Water Project water. And so we have a very reliable system, but those kind of feats of engineering drive up the cost. And so that's why I want to be very clear that imported water is expensive, and that's one of the reasons that we've invested so much into efficiency, because the cheapest unit of water is the one you don't have to buy. That's why we're really investing in this. We also have worked together, and all of the agencies have invested in local supplies like recycled water. In fact, a lot of our irrigation portfolio is made up of recycled water, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So what are some of the benefits of efficiency? Joe touched on some of them earlier, but really, like I said, the cheapest unit is the one you don't have to buy. You save water, you save money. Another benefit is you reduce runoff, or hopefully avoid it altogether, and you avoid property damage. Who is familiar with that cracked asphalt right there and how much it costs to re-slurry asphalt? It's expensive, and if you can avoid it by mitigating the runoff that comes off your property from that irrigation system, you can extend how long it takes to basically invest in repair work to your infrastructure and your property sites. And the secondary benefit, just as Joe was saying, it improves the quality of our local creeks, our local beaches. We all live here and recreate here for a reason. We like the beach, we like to go and visit it, and we don't want to see it get harmed by pollution. By keeping our demands at an efficient level, we can delay investment or even avoid it altogether in infrastructure and storage projects, which are capital improvement projects that cost millions of dollars. So by avoiding having to invest in those systems, we actually get to keep rates lower. And so efficiency doesn't just touch on some of the environmental benefits, it really does have a financial benefit to it. And we just want to stress that that's one of the reasons that we push it. We're trying to keep rates low, and we're trying to avoid having to invest in infrastructure if we can, stay efficient. So one of the ways we do it, and we used to rely very heavily on rebate programs, but now we've had a couple of very large droughts over the last decade, and we've really expanded our portfolio of demand management tools. And some of you, in fact, most of you are probably very familiar with our turf removal program. Turf removal has just been a huge program over the last, I would say, 8 years or so. Collectively, between the 3 water agencies here today, we have removed 7.4 million square feet of turf just in our 3 service areas. And it's also acted to save quite a bit of water. We also realize that in terms of customer engagement, we need to find ways to reach out to you guys. We've done targeted marketing. You'll see later we're going to talk about portals and other ways to, have like your portal and your information, or be able to pay your bill from your handheld phone. And just to make it easier for you to interact and engage in our programs. We also have education programs. We're here today. This is our HOA education program. We also work with children and get the next generation educated on water efficiency. We have workshops, and we also have professional landscape training, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later today. And we'd love to have you guys participate in that as well. And then finally, we prepare for the next drought or the next outage by preparing water shortage contingency plans. So that way, if there's an outage from MET, or there's a big earthquake, or if we have another drought, we're prepared and we can implement those things quickly to make sure that everybody has enough water for health and human safety. So the most effective demand management tool that we have, and I'm speaking for all the agencies now because we're all water budget-based rate agencies, is the water budget-based rate structure. So it is our most effective demand tool. We actually had a study where we worked with UC Riverside, and they looked at consumption levels prior to the implementation of our budget and after, and we saved on average about 5 to 15% of demand. And that translates to not having to purchase about $4 million worth of supply every year. So that's $4 million that doesn't get passed on to ratepayers because we're able to keep demand at an efficient level. What it does is it provides a customized water budget to all of our customers. And we have different ways of calculating that, and you can find all that on our website. And like I said, we're all different, so there's different ways to calculate budgets. So make sure if you're operating in Laguna Woods or Laguna Niguel or Aliso Viejo, you know which water agency you're working with so you can get the right equation. And we'll go through some of those later too. But basically, it's sending you a monthly price signal every month. If you notice that every month you're paying $200, and suddenly you see it start to sneak up a little bit, that's an indication that you could have a leak or that you might be overwatering. And so we try to use it as a tool to help customers stay efficient and catch those small leaks before they become large leaks that could damage your property like we saw earlier. This is great because we've got a lot of landscapers in the room. And also, I think it's good too for property managers and HOA members to understand kind of how the outdoor water budget works and what are some of the elements involved in calculating it. These are going to be different for every agency, but for the most part, these elements are common to all outdoor water budgets. So what you'll find is there's going to be, oh, good, there's an illustrative formula right there. We're going to take your irrigable area into consideration. They're all customized for your particular meter. So if your meter serves 1,000 square feet or 100,000 square feet, we're going to plug that into your equation, and you're going to get that introduced into your budget. So that way it's customized to you. The next element is evapotranspiration. It's basically just a measure of the loss of moisture to the atmosphere, and it's a combination of evaporation and plant transpiration. Plant transpiration is just plant sweat. Plants lose water all day long through their leaves, and there's a certain percentage that we can measure. And then, on hotter days, there's more solar radiation, you're gonna lose more water to evaporation, and we take that into consideration. Next is plant factor. So we introduce a plant factor because we know that you're gonna be irrigating a certain type of landscape. If you look at that, we actually use a 0.7 for our potable budget. The highest is 1.0. It's based on the most water-loving bluegrass, Kentucky bluegrass turf out there, and then it scales down from there. And so the 0.3 to 0.5 range are drought-tolerant plants, and I would say anywhere from like 0.1 to 0.15 are where native plants are. So as you can see, they get smaller and smaller and smaller for plants that require less water. And so we've got about a 0.7. That's somewhere in between like a warm weather turf and a cold weather turf. And then finally, conversion factors. This is the actual calculation for your bill, so we want to make sure that the final outcome is in a billing unit. And so sometimes you'll see 1, sometimes you'll see 2. We have to divide by 0.62 and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, everybody's got a different kind of formula. But one thing I also want to point out is all of those are constants for the most part, with the exception of evapotranspiration. That is going to change daily with the weather and with the time of year and even your location. And so we're going to walk through a little bit of evapotranspiration just to give you guys some of the basic understanding, so that way you know, well, why is my budget going up in the summer and going down in the wintertime? So these are just some of the basics. It also has its own formula. It includes solar radiation, air temperature, humidity, and wind speed. Do you notice what's not in there? Rain. That's right. Yeah, we do not reduce your budget if it rains. That's a freebie. You get to just use that for supplemental irrigation. Yeah, so we do not include rain in here. Basically, it's weighted heavily towards solar radiation. So as you guys can see, in the height of the summer, when we have the longest days of the year and the hottest time of the year, it peaks where it says plant water demand. And then as we enter into the fall, you can see it's got kind of this precipitous drop off. And that's because the days start to get shorter really quick. Now, it still stays hot. We all know it can be 95 on Thanksgiving, but the sun goes down around 5:30. And so if this equation is weighted heavily towards solar radiation, we're actually going to see it fall off. And that's where we see a lot of customers go over budget, is in the fall, because it's still kind of warm, and they're still watering as if it's summer, but your plants don't need as much water. And so that's one of the things that we're here to kind of educate on, is how evapotranspiration works and how it changes throughout the year. You can see it gets very low even in the winter. And it even says it on the slide. I'm glad we're going to send this out. As the days get shorter, your landscape needs less water regardless of temperature. So here's what I also wanted to illustrate. It's not just the time of year that ET goes up and down. You're also going to see, and this is kind of a map of the microclimates in our service area. If you're closer to the coast, you have a marine layer that comes in, and you know, you're not really getting quite the solar radiation, and you got nice humidity all day. You can see we only lose about 42 inches of that moisture throughout the year. That's the dark blue. But as you get further inland and it gets hotter, it's a little more arid, you can actually lose quite a bit more in ET. And you can see, like, they'll actually lose 10 inches more in ET throughout the year in the more inland or the interior areas where it's hotter. And so what we've done over here is just provide an illustration. You can see in the summer it peaks, it goes down in the winter, peaks again in the summer. And then that blue band is actually showing you the range of ET that you're going to find in the service area. So what you can actually see is that in some cases, in like the middle of July, you may actually have 4 inches of ET up to 6. That's all in one service area. So you have to know basically where your location is, where your ET sources are, especially for our landscapers. If you don't know how to get daily ET, call your water district. We've all developed tools or our monthly ET to help you identify what the ET is, so to help you manage water better. And just kind of a simple illustration, if you had 1,000 square feet of turf throughout the year, as you can see on here, it would give you anywhere from about 2.5 CCFs to about 4 CCFs during the peak of the summer. Those 2.5s are for the people that live by the coast. The 4 is for the people that live in the inland area. And that's because it's just hotter, more solar radiation. Again, we're going to send these slides out, and that way you can kind of see how the progression works. But I think it'd be really helpful just to have as a reference, just because ET, like I said, is the thing that drives the variation in the budgets. And so it's good to understand it, and it's good to know where the resources are to get more information on it. And also, another good place for a resource is your bill. On all of our bills, you can see the square footage that's going into it, what your ET total for the month was, and you can calculate your budget yourself if you'd like to. Or if you need to change your square footage, I think all 3 agencies have the ability to go out and remeasure and change your square footage if you feel it should be larger. So just give us a call. Most of our irrigation actually is served by recycled water, and we did that because it offsets potable. Like we talked about earlier, we import all of our potable water, so anytime we can take a locally produced source like recycled water and distribute it to customers, that offsets all that potable demand and helps keep costs down. If you don't already have recycled water, most of the agencies have done a recycled water master plan, and we know where it's more cost effective to install or to convert potable to recycled water, so call your local agency. Met has an on-site retrofit program where you can get some assistance in doing the conversion, and a lot of the the other, actually, we have a supplemental program where we also provide money toward that, and you can double dip. You can go to Met, and you can go to us. And El Toro actually will pay for the entire conversion if it's deemed to be a cost-effective project. If you're interested in that, go talk to your respective agency, pick up our cards, and we can chat with you afterward. Who here has gotten a water device rebate? A water device rebate. Have you ever applied through Metropolitan for a rebate? Who is aware that the residential rebate process is different than the commercial rebate process? So the residential rebates, you make sure that you buy an eligible product, you go out and purchase it, and then you submit your receipt and your water bill to Met, and then you just wait for the money to come in. It's a little different with commercial, and I want to explain that because we have a ton of really great commercial rebates that we want you guys to take advantage of, but I want to make sure that you apply correctly so that way you can take advantage of the incentive. Contractors, large commercial customers typically have, they buy in bulk. They just have bigger purchases. And so the system through Metropolitan is that you go to their website, which is SoCalWatersmart.com. We actually have a rep here from Met too if you have any questions about the rebate program. You make a reservation. And they do that because a lot of times you're not buying 1 or 2 toilets, you're buying 100 toilets. So they need to make sure that there's money available for you. You don't want to go out and buy 100 toilets and then ask for the rebate later because the money might not be there. Make a reservation online. All you have to do is just tell Met how many devices you want to purchase and what type, and they'll make sure that the money is available. You'll get a notice to proceed. And at that point, you have 60 days to purchase and install the items that you made the reservation for. Once you're done doing the installation, then you can go back to the website and finish up the application. So just remember, if you're applying for a residential rebate, you can go ahead and make the purchase, apply later. If you're commercial, make the reservation first because we want to make sure that the funds are available. I don't think you'll have a problem with that in this area. We really like to make sure that the funding is available, but if you're working outside of these 3 agencies, just be aware that that could be an issue. So these are our great commercial rebates. You guys are probably all familiar with the toilets and urinals. Those have been around forever. But did you also know we have rebates on ice machines for your community rooms? We have great rebates for stuff like that. And one of the things I wanted to highlight today is the outdoor efficiency rebates. We have weather-based irrigation controllers, which I know we talked about a little bit earlier. We have a budget that basically tracks the weather and gives you a budget on a monthly basis based on how the weather changes. Well, we also have devices that will help irrigate that way also. And so it's very complementary to the budget structures that you guys are operating in these areas. High efficiency nozzles, they can reduce your outdoor water consumption by 30%. We also have high efficiency rotors, cisterns, and soil moisture sensors that actually work in concert with the weather-based irrigation controllers. Even if your weather-based irrigation controller is telling your irrigation system to turn on, the soil moisture sensor can say, we've got enough moisture, and it'll delay irrigating. If you're interested in those things or you have more questions about them, stop by some of the water efficiency or some of the water agency tables and we can explain it to you. Another big one, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is commercial turf removal. All 3 agencies still have this available. The funding levels will vary. It does require a pre and post inspection. If you're applying in the Moulton-Niguel service area, apply directly through our website because we manage the program internally. If you're applying through El Toro or for El Toro or Santa Margarita, you'll have to go to the Municipal Water District of Orange County's website. But we still have that available. It's a great program. And thanks to a lot of HOAs like you guys, we've been able to take out 7.4 million square feet of turf. We'd like to see more of that non-functional turf get replaced and turned into drought-tolerant landscaping. We also have a spray-to-drip program. And again, the levels will vary. It does require the pre and post inspection, but it's something that you can do in concert with your turf removal program. So while you're out there exchanging the plant vegetation type, exchange the irrigation. If you're not making changes to the irrigation, it doesn't matter what type of plants you put in. They kind of work hand in hand. We wanted to highlight Ocean Ranch HOA. It's a HOA in the Moulton-Niguel service area. They've done a huge project at their site, and they're actually here in the audience today if you have questions for them later. And we also have a flyer of our case study of their project, but they started noticing they were getting high water bills in 2010. Their landscaping committee hired a consultant. They made a very forward-thinking, commitment to transforming their landscapes. They had a lot of dead acacia, and they had some non-functional turf that they wanted to take out. But by the way, non-functional is nobody's using it. Only the gardener mows it. Nobody's using it. So why is it there? They took out about 2.3 million square feet overall. A lot of that was dead shrubs, and now they have a beautiful plant palette. You can go out there and see they've got agave and bougainvillea. It's colorful all year round, and that was some of the things that the residents were interested in. We actually got a chance to sit down and interview Howard Revere. He's the project champion and landscape committee chair, and we said, hey, Howard, what are the keys to your success? Basically, it was a forward-thinking landscape committee. They had great leadership. They also had a project champion in Howard. You got to have somebody when tensions kind of rise and interest wanes that says, no, guys, we can do this. And so they had somebody like that. They also had a very inclusive planning approach. They made sure that their community was kept up to date, and they included them on the plant palette selection, and they just made sure that communication was key throughout the process. And I want to show you the result of all their hard work. So you can see in 2010, they implemented their landscape transformation process. The blue line is a constructed budget. Prior to that, we didn't have it until 2011. But as you can see, they actually were exceeding their budget prior to 2010. And as we move closer and closer to today, they're actually consuming at half of their budget. So they're super efficient, and their landscape is beautiful. So if you get a chance, drive through and check it out. I think you're all going to like it. And we also, like I said, have a flyer. If you want to take a look at it, it'll be at the Molten Nagel booth. There are a lot of opportunities to see what this looks like in action. A huge movement has started over the last 5 to 10 years, because I think a lot of people have always thought, rocks and cactus, I don't like that. But there's a huge variety of natives and a huge variety of drought tolerance and plants, and you can find them at these demonstration gardens. There's a beautiful one at El Toro Water District at their headquarters. If you want to check it out, we have some in the Molten Nagel service area. Over at Saddleback College and the Nagel Botanical Preserve. And usually they're free. You can just kind of walk through, and you can also see examples of microspray and more efficient irrigation systems too. So here's kind of the meat and potatoes of this whole thing. I wanted to get to the best management practices. There's a lot of best management practices out there, but a lot of water agency people sit around in the room. We don't agree on much, but these are the things we do agree on. Take regular meter reads. Okay. You won't be able to track how much water you're using, or if your usage is out of whack, or if it's not normal, if you don't take meter reads. If you don't have advanced metering technology, it takes a second to just flip the lid, take your meter read, note it down, and then go to the next meter. You do have AMI, like all of our potable and recycled water meters are on AMI. You can actually log into a portal and see hourly consumption. You just need to track it. You can't manage what you can't measure. Understand your outdoor budget equations. We kind of walk through what they're made of, several constants with the variation in ET. It's a little different for every agency, so if you're operating in other agencies, just give them a call. We love to talk about water, so just call us. We'll tell you all about it. And utilize your ET resources. If you don't know what your ET was for the week, we've got a nice app that you can go to our website, plug in where you live, and put in the date, and boom, there's your ET for the week. And then there's other references too. I believe El Toro uses CIMIS data. It's free. You just go online and say, I want this CIMIS station and for these dates, and there's your ET. Implement weather-based irrigation technology. We provide a rebate for it, and in a lot of cases, you can almost get them for free. They help with maintaining your usage and keeping it kind of correlated to your budget, so it's always a good practice. Regular irrigation assessments. I can't stress this enough. If you're out there, run the stations. Look for the geysers. All it takes is turning it on, running it for 1 minute. If you see Old Faithful on the other side of the back 40, that needs help. And so those are some of the things we want to stress to people. While you're out there, just run them. And then a performance-based approach. This is mostly for HOA managers, and actually managing our own landscape maintenance contract. I found this document very helpful. This is on the MODOC website. It's a performance-based irrigation management contract template. The Irrigation Association also puts one out. But if you're looking to try to get more performance-based indicators into your contract to work with your landscapers, take a look at this. It's free, it's online, and actually Matt from MODOC has a couple of copies here if you want to take a look at it. And then finally, I added these two myself because I like them. Look for opportunities to convert non-functional turf areas, because you could see how the Ocean Ranch HOA, they put in drought-tolerant plants and they're at half of their budget. They're not paying for any more than what they water. I mean, you don't have to water up to your budget, that 0.7 plant factor. You can put in 0.4 and just do half. That's water savings and money savings. And then finally, great communication. I think after interviewing several HOA board members, we found that some of the best managed landscapes have the best communicating landscapers, property managers, and HOA board members. They make sure everybody's kept up to date, and they keep everybody in the loop. Another thing, HOAs, these are drought era policies that came out and are still in effect today. So I want to make sure that you guys are all aware of these because these are questions that we get from our homeowners quite a bit. HOAs, you cannot prohibit drought tolerant landscape or the installation of artificial turf. If you've got CCNRs that act to restrict those, they are nullified by the California Civil Code. So just be aware of that. Like I said, we get a lot of phone calls and there may be some misinformation. So I just wanted to clear it up. It is still part of the California Civil Code. Also, if there are times where the governor or a local government declares a drought-related state of emergency, it is illegal to fine a homeowner who decides to not water their turf anymore or water their landscape. So just make sure that you're aware of the policies that are still in effect today. Kind of getting to the end of the slideshow, but I want to make sure you guys were aware that some of the agencies also offer commercial site visits where we can go out and help you identify leaks and just find opportunities to increase your efficiency. There's also free programs provided by Metropolitan Water District to do large landscape surveys. And those are for surveys of acreages of 1 acre or more. Just go to their website, bewaterwise.com, and you can sign up. And they give you a nice report, return on investment for all those water conservation measures. Again, talking about the portal, you can pay your bills online. Every agency is different, so I don't want to speak for all of us, but for the Molten Niguel portal, you can pay your bills, you can view your current and past usage. If you have AMI, you'll soon be able to receive leak notifications. Get signed up for them. It's just an easy way to just get a notification on your phone, or easy way to pay your bill from your phone. For our landscapers in the room, we've all invested quite a bit in professional landscape training. We know that the look of the landscape is changing. You can't take out 7.5 million square feet of turf, and that's just what we paid for. There's the multiplier effect. We could have millions and millions of turf out there that's been converted without being educated on how to maintain those landscapes. There's tons of them out there. The Qualified Water Efficient Landscape Certification, that's being offered in Orange County currently. Another one that Molten has particularly tried to promote is the Watershed Wise Landscape Professional Certification, and that's going to help you learn how to manage runoff and keep it on site and do more of a watershed approach to design. And then finally, and we'll hear probably a little bit more about this later, the CMPS has a native plant specialist certification. And I think if you're landscaping in this area, you'll know that this is a hotbed for natives. And so if you know how to maintain natives, you're able to identify them and know about their water needs, it'll make your business a hotter commodity. And then finally, the CLIA, the Certified Landscape Irrigation Auditor, that just shows to anybody that's going to hire you that you know how to do an irrigation assessment and that you've taken the steps to learn more about it. In the spirit of partnership, today we're here with a lot of our cities and a couple of other water agencies, but as June mentioned earlier, we're also partnering with these same cities, a couple of local NGOs, OC Coastkeeper and Laguna Bluebelt, as well as the county, to do our own help to try to mitigate runoff. One of the reasons that we start to do these programs is because we realize that dry weather runoff, which is the runoff that occurs when you're irrigating and goes down into the storm drain, we have a lot of information about that. We have meter level data that lets us know, hey, somebody's over irrigating. And so having that data and having these programs, which are very cost effective, we can work with all of our surrounding cities and NGOs to help implement programs that reduce overwatering and avoid urban runoff. And so that's some of the stuff that we're trying to do through our partnership. Additionally, we worked with OC Public Works, OC Code Lab, and the Data Collaborative, again, to try to use data to basically educate our customers. We're building an urban drool tool, which is it's a nice, funny way of saying urban runoff, to let customers know where's their runoff in my neighborhood and what can I do about it. And then finally, one thing to add is that we are all agencies of the California Data Collaborative, which is a statewide organization that is trying to basically use water data to improve the public sector, to basically use that data to make things more efficient and to build programs that are more effective for you guys. In the spirit of collaboration, moving on again, we really want to work with you guys. We want to build sustainable communities. As Joe said earlier, if you've got outreach channels that you need information for newsletters, or if you've got your own portal, we send out an e-newsletter every month. We have paper newsletters. We've got tons of programs. So just let us know, or if you have an event that you would like us to table at, just give us a call. We would like to work with you guys to develop water-saving programs. I've always wanted to do a master valve and flow sensor pilot program, but I'm interested in your ideas too. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate you listening to me.
Do you adjust your water budget formula from time to time because it's based on historical data, I assume? And then since we had a real hot December, we went over our budget. we had Santa Ana winds, we had above average temperatures, and so are you going to make some considerations there?
I'm speaking for Moulton. This is why it's important to make sure that if you have a question about your specific bill or your budget, that you go to the agency that you're working with. But for us, we do not use historical information. We're actually collecting real-time weather data, and we have a microgrid, so we're trying to get the most accurate information as possible. And yes, so it does take into consideration aridity. We know that humidity is much lower during Santa Ana winds, and so it will take that information into consideration.
What about the number of occupants in a home? Does that have any factor in the budgeting of water?
Yeah, we didn't discuss the indoor budget, but it's mostly a residential approach. Residents, they actually have, it depends on your agency again, but yeah, you are generally allocated a certain gallons per day per person living in your home, and that's going to be your indoor budget. And we mostly just talked about the outdoor budget just to make sure that the irrigators in the room were familiar with it. But yes, it does factor into your indoor budget.
And is there any impact on the sewer part of the water bill?
If you are in Moulton-Niguel Water District, yes, there is a per person wastewater charge. So if you have 4 people living in your home, you'll get an allocation on the front end for your water supply, and then that'll also factor into your wastewater charge. Now, that is not, I don't think that applies for the other agencies in the service area, but if you have very specific questions, I can follow up with you after.